Afternoon, Kevin.
Good afternoon, Mitch. Is it the afternoon yet?
Hopefully.
It took a while to set this up, didn't it?
Yeah. New setup.
Yeah, we're in our new setup thanks to Edelman Public Affairs here in Ottawa. And we got the Peace Tower in the back. We got the West Block in the back here. And we actually have our guest in person today. So we're not actually using Zoom.
No more Zoom, please.
Yeah, that was not the easiest thing to do. But here we got Graham Looney from Edelman Public Affairs, who's been kind of working on the election, basically trying to find where the Prime Minister is every day.
Yeah.
And he's here to tell us a little bit about what the parties are up to, what this election has to do with technology, and how things are going and what people should look out for if you're a technology company in Canada and you're watching an election. You're wondering what the issues are. So, Graham, why don't we, what do you do? Who are you?
Yeah.
Welcome to the show.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, guys. So it's great to see you guys putting this together, and it's awesome to have this new location. Very happy to have the relationship between Edelman and you guys, which is great.
Yeah.
So as Kevin said, I'm a consultant here at Edelman doing work on the policy files, but also our tech files. And right now we're in the midst of a federal election here in Canada. And so myself, our analyst team, and our political experts are monitoring the election, keeping tabs on things for a broad range of industries. But I myself am particularly interested in the technology angle. And like you said, a lot of it is tracking down where the leader is. A lot of it is chasing Justin, trying to figure out where these people are. But once we get this kind of insight and this intel, we're able to share that with our clients, and we're able to inform the type of strategies that we have for tech companies that are engaging both at the political and the bureaucratic levels here in Canada.
Right. And so tell us a little bit about what you do with Edelman. So you're providing this insight to these technology companies. What do they typically use that for?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a broad range. It's a spectrum of information that we provide to our clients. Sometimes it's really hands-on, letting them know who the players are at a political or a bureaucratic level. But during an election, when there is political change and when there's a lot of uncertainty in the air, a lot of these companies are taking a look at what their PR and public affairs plans are for the next 5 years, for the next 10 years, and how their investments in Canada are going to be impacted by the actions of political parties. So that's one of the big things that they use our intelligence to help them make decisions on. But another big part is just to figure out how quickly we're moving towards things like digital transformation and some of the technology, how quickly we're using some of the technology that some of these companies have to offer.
Okay. And what do you think's the big takeaways, at least coming into this election, in terms of technology and tech companies? Like, where should they be looking? What are they looking at right now? What's the big topics right now?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a bit of a disclaimer, we're recording in the middle of the election. The current incumbent government, the Liberal government here in Canada, hasn't actually released their political campaign platform yet. So a lot of the insights that you would get about the Liberals are based on their budgets and their previous actions up to this point. They recently released a federal budget in April of 2021. And so a lot of our intel is looking at that and saying, okay, are they re-announcing things? Are they committing to take things a little bit further? But there's some subject matter areas that these companies need to take a look at, and it's primarily connectivity. That's something that across the board, these political parties are recognizing as important for Canadians and important for the government. This is supporting your hybrid workforce at a bureaucratic level, making sure that you can keep the lights on and keep your government running efficiently, but also is essential to move forward with digital citizen services. So this is the idea, like being able to get a passport renewed entirely digitally. You're able to engage with your government officials through your computers. And in order to do that, you need to make sure that your citizens have access to broadband. This is something that's in the platforms from the Conservatives. It was in the budget from the Liberals. And it's a point of interest for the NDP as well. It's something that really matters when we're moving towards technology. That being said, that leads into so many other technology areas, because as soon as that link is made, you can start looking at amazingly interesting technologies to actually be used day to day by Canadians and by the government. I think that's another split to consider too, is that these tech companies need to understand that they're selling their wares, they're selling their services, they're selling their technologies, both for use by the government as a huge organization, just keeping the lights on, like I said, and in order to do things for Canadians, in order to, improve improve connectivity, improve access to certain technologies for Canadians. So there's kind of two different angles to look at. And depending on what your company does, you might have a different focus in those areas.
And do you think COVID-19 really heightened that area of connectivity and really brought it to light how important it is, and the fact that the world's kind of changed to these hybrid workforces and remote work? Do you think that kind of heightened the party's political kind of look at these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And as much as we're in an election, all of these platforms need to respond to what the government has done up until this point. And our Liberal government at this time was throwing money at COVID and making sure that people were able to work from home, making sure that their government was connected into their central networks. And they looked at broadband connectivity, the Universal Broadband Fund, and some of the essential investments that they proposed to make are now needing to be matched by all the other parties who might not necessarily have looked at that as an area of focus. But you can't really take things back once they've been announced, and particularly because of COVID, it accelerated certain technology areas, accelerated the adoption of certain technologies, both by the government and by Canadians in general, and that pushes things forward. But there's an important caveat when talking about COVID and the government, is that because of the amount of strain that it has put on the government in traditional industries, and the response that's required just to keep people, afloat, keep people solvent, and keep all industries across Canada running, you see kind of it's weird. You see it as an accelerator for technology adoption, but it's also an inhibitor, because there's only so much money to go around. And we need to be mindful of the narrative that we talk about COVID driving the adoption of technology with governments, because yes, it absolutely does, but there's still going to be hiccups and roadblocks as we recover from this pandemic, particularly financially, looking at the budget, the oversight for certain financial organizations in Canada. It's an interesting, it'd be great to say that we're all going to be a hybrid workforce and we're all going to work from home, have access to all this good technology, but there's challenges that are inherent in our current political situation.
Yeah, you brought up a good point, because the government is investing in broadband. It really is two streams. You're talking about citizens getting the access to the internet and the digital economy, and then the government operations itself, right, supporting the workers at home. Do you suspect that the government will continue to work from home? I mean, all the provinces, the federal government, all of them went working from the suburbs or wherever they are, right? So do you expect that trend to continue? Do you observe that it's different in different provinces, for instance? What do you think is the government's going to look like going forward from a workplace perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is where I get to kind of provide insight that is provided by clients. I don't claim to be an expert in that particular subject matter, but we're seeing it. And particularly at the federal level, where there was just a very heavy-handed move to work from home, departments like the Department of Transport, they will possibly never go back into a full office workplace. They were the first to announce it, and there's many different ministries that are pushing down directives to move towards this hybrid workforce. And I think it's something that if you were a private sector expert 5 years ago, you would have said it was obvious because it makes a lot of sense for the type of work that we do nowadays, but there's challenges doing simple tasks such as document signing and even just management contracts and things like that. That's government has their ways of doing things. And despite the fact that they're moving towards it, I would say that the feds are going to be leading as far as a work from home example. But it's hard to say what it's going to look like.
And do you see any particular political parties, talking about that or making that a front of their platform? Because you would think that those parties that really cared about the environment, for instance, having the whole workforce working from home in a place like Ottawa, for instance, would reduce congestion astronomically, right? Because no one's going downtown anymore. Yeah. So is there a political party that's talking about that that has made front and center like a modernization or an evolution of the Canadian public sector?
Not really. And this is part of the thing about digital technology and just technology in general with the Canadian federal government that I think we need to be mindful of is that we're still not the number one focus. It's what we do day in and day out. And I know you guys are really focused in on the work that's going on in this area. But the governments need to focus on their traditional industries in Canada: agriculture, natural resources, manufacturing. These are some areas that are going to take the vast majority of their time. It's a great angle to think about, and it's something that as digital, I guess, stewards, as these companies start establishing their plans, it's something that you can bring to government and you can use in your messaging to align with the goals of, managing climate change, looking at greener technologies, because that is certainly an area of focus for most parties.
And do you see a shift at all in terms of, you talk about like traditional industries? Do you see any parties calling for a digital transformation in any of those traditional industries as a part of their platform to kind of enhance and make those industries stronger in Canada?
In some part. I think when we talk about the adoption of digital technology and innovation, one of the topics that comes up a lot is artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
Those areas in the platforms that have been currently published and just in general how these parties operate, those are the kind of areas that would be supported through funding and through government programs designed to support the development and adoption of new technologies. It's something that the Liberals absolutely have had in their platform. They throw money into the supercluster program, into different industrial research grants, and that's something that we would probably expect to be matched by the Conservatives, perhaps not the NDP quite as much, but it's just like any other kind of growing industry in Canada. It's going to receive attention. And the fact that Canada is a leading economy when it comes to high technology and artificial intelligence, these are areas that are going to receive focus.
Yeah, and, kind of segueing a little bit away from the election for a second, they talk about these technologies being adopted in government, AI being a perfect example, automation. What kind of barriers are you seeing? I mean, no matter who wins the election, Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, whatever, when they get back, the public service will still be adopting new technologies. They'll still be adopting cloud. What kind of barriers are you seeing in your day-to-day work within departments where the technology companies and public service are not kind of matching up? The public service are having a hard time adopting the technologies. Like where you see the challenges, and do you think maybe there's no easy ways, but there's some easy ways to surmount these challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing is just technology literacy, and we're all guilty of it, and need to be better at understanding how we can use technology and how we can reduce our dependence on traditional ways of business. There's usually an easy way to fix your problem with the technology that is readily available and inexpensive, but things that are readily available and inexpensive for the private sector very quickly become expensive and complicated and drawn out for the public sector because of the checks and balances that are required for an organization that is using tax dollars to fund programs, that has specific security requirements and privacy requirements. That's one of the main areas of kind of I would say contention there is this issue of data privacy, and the use of both personally identifiable information and just government data in general. It prevents them from being flexible. So that's an area that will absolutely be improved as there's better regulations set in place, as there's better privacy laws, and more attention given to the impact of this growing sector. The other area is just recognizing that this is legitimate, and that there are many players in this industry. Government, in some cases, has a tendency to find a solution and kind of follow the solution that they're comfortable with, which is it's perfectly reasonable. As an organization, you recognize that, okay, I'm comfortable with this technology, but you'll notice that governments tend to lag behind, or they tend to run a few years behind the cutting edge of technology, and sometimes that leads to problems with competition. Sometimes that leads to issues with actual adoption of that technology by their user base, whether it be the public service or citizens, because they've already got access to other technology that is better through the private sector. So those are some areas that I think would be important to consider when looking at, I don't know, where you could polish things up a bit.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it's interesting to hear that privacy laws are going to kind of come front and center, and regulations as well, in terms of like how the data is managed and all that. I mean, I know I've done quite a lot of work on that area, but do you think that there's also a large call to hold some of these big players accountable in terms of regulatory and tax bases? And has that really been seen in some of these kind of laid out plans yet?
Yeah, absolutely. And to answer your question directly, yes, keeping some of these technology companies under wraps is a goal for all major parties. Actually, Liberals, NDP, Conservatives, Bloc have all recognized that there are certain tax policies that need to be implemented, particularly on technology companies that manage information and media that gets consumed in Canada. So this diverges a little bit from the traditional areas of focus for some of the work that I do, which is mainly keeping the lights on, the infrastructure and the software behind the programs that Government of Canada uses. But absolutely, for organizations that either influence Canadian media, provide Canadian media, or interact with Canadians' data, there's for example, it seems that 3% corporate tax seems to be where all the major parties are landing on companies like Facebook or Netflix that are providing a media service to Canadians, and that's just about kind of bringing the regulations up to speed with where the technology is. We're no longer consuming media through traditional forms, and that's one of the things that these parties are looking at, and the government very likely will be moving on to, no matter which party forms government. There's, of course, some interesting caveats in there, and there's differences between what's in the Liberal budget and the Conservative platform. It seems like the Conservative platform definitely does have a slant to advantage companies a little bit. They won't have to pay it if they already pay corporate tax in Canada, which is an easy way to get off the hook for 3% tax. But we'll see how these things transpire. But absolutely, it's kind of a two prongs of conversation. The media, absolutely. Digital companies that front as media, they're going to be regulated, and I think they're prepared for that. But the more interesting conversation, I think, will be around privacy, because that's something that is going to filter down all the way through the tech ecosystem, and you're going to have to be mindful of that, whether it's a database or whether it is an AI technology that's being used to manage people's taxes. And it's going to be interesting seeing how certain parties will try and develop policies in-house and look at our own expertise to develop that, and then others will be looking internationally to the EU, to other global best practices on how to manage data and privacy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of this, platform political stuff is very, I don't know, high level, like national in scope. Like no party's going around there talking about, adoption of cloud within government. Like it doesn't get votes, not sexy. It's like, it's not announceable. But I guess like when whoever gets elected, if it's liberals, conservatives, whatever, it must be a bit of not rude awakening, but, a reality check when they end the government and they're like, wow, so there's a lot of, plumbing going on here, wasn't expecting this kind of thing. And how do you see how's the election going so far? Like, people are talking about, is it going to be an easy majority government for Trudeau? Doesn't look like it's going to be as easy as they thought. Yeah. What are the polls at these days? What kind of trends are you seeing? Where do you see things going, and what kind of big things should people look out for? I know we got debates coming up, so maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it is absolutely high level stuff. And then once they get into the weeds, we get to have the fun conversations. But the polls right now, we're just at the end of August, are trending in a way that the Liberals were perhaps not expecting. They're evening out and bringing the Conservatives, actually. Some leading polls put the Conservatives ahead in certain areas, which is your most favorable leader. But that's something to look at right now. But I think it's important to remember how much things changed after the leaders' debates in the past elections. And that's something that I think we'll see the parties sink or swim, how they perform. Because then you're only a few weeks out from election day. People are finally really starting to pay attention. They're realizing, oh no, I have to cast my vote real quick, and that's something that will influence that area. I think the biggest thing right now is the Liberal platform. If they decide to hold off on that until they've been able to tweak it to answer every little question that they've got on the campaign, it might come out and be this very tailored document that answers all the questions. Or they might wait too long and people won't read it, and then they'll be looking at the Conservative platform and say, wow, they gave it to us right away. They said that this is the way that things are going to go. From an operational perspective, I think that's what we really need to wait for, is that liberal platform. From a policy perspective, we don't want to dive into this conversation, but it's important to mention it. There's an ongoing pandemic in Canada, and the leaders' responses to issues like vaccinations, to issues like healthcare, social services, and employment insurance and other benefits are really going to be important moving forward. It's about as far from Govtech as you can get, but it's really important for the government here in Canada. It's important for Canadians, and that those are going to be key areas of focus for the next few weeks here.
Mm-hmm. And Graham, maybe just a final question for those wondering. Maybe they have an application in for funding, or maybe they want to pursue that contract. Is business is going on as usual with government? What typically happens during an election? If, I'm a technology company trying to do business with the federal government, for instance, what should they think about and expect?
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got, in Canada, when you enter into a federal election, there's something called the caretaker convention that happens. And this just means that the government is implored to kind of lie low for a little while. For businesses that are doing business, for technology companies that are doing business with the government of Canada right now, they're going to be largely unfazed. I'm sure experts will understand that 36 days for a federal election isn't actually that long. They can manage this. And you're just not going to see big announcements. You're not going to see new procurements going out the door. You're not going to see big funding announcements coming from ministers because they're trying to stay nonpartisan. But for the vast majority of our clients and companies that work on infrastructure or work on software, their procurement processes will continue. Basically, if it was in the docket, as it were, it's going to keep happening, and the election isn't really going to impact things too much. much.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's going to be lots of people happy about that.
Yeah.
So, so Graham
Don't
Looney.
come chasing my neck. If
So Graham Looney with Edelman,
Yeah.
great to have you. Thank you very
Thanks.
much for providing that update on the election, and look forward to having you again soon.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We'll have to have you back on once this is all over.
Yeah, maybe we'll clean up and see how well my predictions are. I'm not saying any numbers or anything like that, so I think I'm safe, right? Don't paint me with one
you're
brush.
very diplomatic.
Yeah, no. Thanks so much, guys. This was great.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.